They just don't mind it.
You could introduce me. I don't have an identity crisis. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
You ready to start, Herschel? Is that on?
Yes, it's on.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the 10th yard of Rabbi Groner. We are very privileged to have Rabbi Chazan. Rabbi Chazan is the rabbi of the Holy Law Synagogue in England. He's a world-renowned speaker and orator. He was also a member of the Kollel. He's a alumni of the Kollel, which is something which is very dear to Rabbi Groner's heart. He was there for 2 years, between 1981 and 1984. So it's a great honor for us to hear from him tonight on this special occasion. No further ado, Rabbi Chazan.
Let me begin just by telling you, some people collect, people have hobbies, various hobbies. Some people collect stamps, others collect coins. I collect stories. I want to just start by telling you one of my favorite Chassidic stories, and you'll see how it relates to the topic tonight, whatever it's supposed to mean, and the life of Rabbi Groner. There was one of the greatest, most renowned Chassidic tzaddikim in Poland, was renowned as the Saba Kadisha of Radzymin. And he had incredible powers. People would come to him from all over Poland to ask for brachas, for yeshuas, for parnosa, for you needed health, you needed someone's ill, someone needs a child, whatever you needed. It was a central focal address for all the needs of Jews in Poland. To the extent that many Gentiles, especially rich Polish noblemen, aristocrats, used to come to him and ask for brachas. He was renowned. The day happened when the Saba Kadisha of Radzymin was about to go the way of all flesh, to return his soul to his maker. And everyone gathers round, and amongst them, obviously, was his son, who was also a renowned scholar, a very saintly, holy man. And the Saba Kadisha sort of gives over his last will and testament, and he requests that his son should be a successor, should be the new Rebbe. And the son said, Tati, I can't be a Rebbe. Because in order to be a Rebbe, you have to be one of the one of the central activities of a Rebbe has to read a kvittel. See them come to them with a pidyon nefesh, with a petition, with all their inner requests, and to really be able to read a pan, you have to be able not just to read the words, but to read between the lines. To put it very bluntly, the real Rebbes used to say, a real Rebbe, immediately when the pan is posted, right, or when the chassid sets out on his journey to go to the Rebbe, the Rebbe has to already feel what's happening, etc., etc. Moreover, when you write the pan, right, the Rebbe should be able to read between the lines and know everything about the chassid, right? Not only in this lifetime, but in every incarnation that his neshama has come down throughout history, since Adam Arishan, and since the moment when all neshamas were divided and some come from the shirish of Cain, of Hevel, etc., etc., etc. You have to know everything about this person. So the son of the Saba Kadisha of Radzymin said to his tata, I'm not shaykh. No one ever taught me the secret of how you read a kvittel. I want to tell you just parenthetically while I'm talking, I'm reminded of the classic story told of a woman who came into Yechidus by our Rebbe, and she gave her zettel, and the Rebbe's reading it, and putting it on his glasses, and off his glasses, and on his glasses. And just like, right. And finally the Rebbe answered her request, gave her the brachas for that which she required, and as she's about to leave the Yechidus, the Rebbe's room, the Rebbe says, such a difficult handwriting, such a difficult zettel. In this generation, the only people who will be able to read such a zettel is my father-in-law, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the previous Belzer Rebbe. Because of the she's like shocked. She doesn't know that she has anything. His penmanship doesn't seem to be any inferior to anyone else. She leaves the Rebbe's room. She opens up her handbag, and she realized to her horror, instead of giving the Rebbe her zettel that she had still in the zettel, right, her bag, she gave the Rebbe her shopping list. And the Rebbe was looking and glasses on, glasses off, until he was able to answer. Hello? For that you have to be... Hello? I have a very, very close friend of mine. I don't know why I'm talking this, just parenthetically, just add while I'm talking. I have a very close friend who actually was my shadchan, who arranged my meeting, my wife, and my whatever. He was he had studied in a Lithuanian yeshiva, near Yisrael, and Mir, very, very distinguished person. He actually wrote many Sforim afterwards. And he had certain questions about Lubavitch. All right? And when he was studying in yeshiva, the heads of the yeshiva like put in his mind certain issues that Lubavitch has questionable, dubious practices, etc., etc. And when he was going to the first time, like he was at fork in the roads in his life, and he decided to go into the Rebbe, and he'll ask the Rebbe all these questions. But he's a very thoughtful, pensive, intellectual type of person, right? So he sat down weeks preparing what he's going to talk about with the Rebbe, and he formulated it's like the 50 different basic questions on Lubavitch. Hello? A very straightforward guy. He's a straightforward, He prepared to settle, and the boys are waiting to go into Yechidus, a group of Bachram, him amongst them, and Rabbi Groner would ask, I see your settle. He didn't want to see the content, he wanted to see how long it is. Because you get everyone, these weird guys that come to them with 50 questions, will take in this dozens of people waiting.
Rabbi Groner, they might think
No, Rabbi Groner, Rabbi Leibel, right? The guy Rabbi Groner looks at the length of the settle. There's no way, my dear friend, with the best intentions in the world, that we're allowing you to go into Rebbe with a list of 50 questions. Take 5 seminal questions, things really bothering you, whatever, and crystallize all your. Fine. He's a very straight guy. He rewrote the settle and wrote like 5 basic questions. He then goes into the Rebbe, gives the Rebbe the settle, right? The Rebbe reads it, and the Rebbe reads it, and then the Rebbe starts talking to him. And suddenly, my friend, who's a very close mate of mine, he starts shaking. Because he realized he had rewritten the settle of the 50 questions, he took 5, and the Rebbe started answering the questions, but in the order of the original settle, in order 1 to 50. Hello? Are you with me? Hello?
I'm with you.
The guy comes, and Rabbi Groner, is coming out to try to schlep him out, and he wanted to kill him because he was sure that he wrote off, but he really gave the original settle. The guy is as straight as they come, right? That's what happened. So a Rebbe, in order to answer a settle, answer a pidyon nefesh, a kvittel, you have to read between the lines, to put it simple. So getting back to my story, the Sabbath of Radishitz, right, tells his father, Tata, I don't know how to read a settle. To which he answered, and this is so important, we want to talk about tonight, right? And this was said by many other tzaddikim, also to other Rebbes. If a Yid comes to you with a tzorah, right? And you can't read a settle, you're not a Rebbe, you're not a miracle worker, right? You're not one of these transcendent, supernatural people flying in the sky. But if you feel their pain as acutely as your own pain, and you daven for him, you'll be able to be Peil Yeshuvas. You'll be able to achieve what you have to achieve, right? So the Sabbath Kaddish of Radishitz then eventually passed away. He said the prayers, the vidui, the nishmas, whatever he said before, and his soul expired. He went up to heaven, and after the funeral, after the shiva, his son was appointed his successor. Day 1 in his new job, new Rebbe, sitting in the Rebbe's swivel chair, whatever. And suddenly a fellow comes running in frantically, like, says, Rebbe, Rata, help, SOS, like sort of, my wife went into labor. And the midwives say that, her life is on the line. She's mamish in sakana. Both mother and baby, their lives are on the line. Rebbe, Rata, help. Here's the zettel, here's the kvittel, here's the pidyon. Thank you very much. He doesn't know what to do. It's like the first test, just ran the Rebbe. And he knows, he told his father he doesn't know how to read a zettel, right? But he has to feel the pain. So he gets the gabbai, the new gabbai, goes to the doctor next door, shut me here fast. And he says, Doctor, I'm a zocher, I'm a male, right? I never really went through the travails of childbirth, but could you try to explain to me medically what it feels like, right? So I can feel that pain as acutely as. To which the doctor says, I'm also a zocher. But I would imagine, from what I understand, it's something like having your wisdom teeth extracted. Thank you so much. He then puts on his Rebbe Shapelts, and he goes running down the village, and he goes to the local dentist. He says, do me a favor, pull out my tooth. So he's sitting there in the chair, and he examines, investigates, perfectly healthy tooth. Flecknischkeit is an emergency, they cut the queue, they pull out the tooth. After you get a tooth extracted, it's very bloody, and he's taking some water and trying to set up. And before they extract the next tooth, suddenly the husband of the Makshul Aledes has managed to track the Rebbe down. It probably wasn't the big shtetl in the first place. Rebbe, Baruch Hashem, Mazel Tov, Lita Zachar, mother and baby are well. And Chassidim would relate the story, and they said the miracle of the story is not the fact that the woman gave birth successfully and safely, but that she did it so fast before the Rebbe lost every tooth in his mouth. That's the pella, the miracle of the story. But the moral of the story is that to be Poel a Yeshua, to be able to achieve something, to take away the pain of another Jew, you have to be able to feel that pain as acutely as your own. I was just sitting in Koil. I haven't been here for 18 years. I learned in Koil here 35 years ago. And I just had a flashback of a moment I was sitting in the back row of the Koil, diagonally opposite Rabbi Groner, and someone came to tell them that one of the members of the Kehillah had passed away. And the expression, and the pain that you felt was demonstrable, was palpable, that's never left me 35 years later. I have a vision, whatever you want to about Rabbanus, he was my role model. He was a role model of how to care, how to feel the pain of another person. So what I want to deal with tonight is a very simple topic. They gave me a topic I didn't know what the words mean. So I try to just deal. They told me basically talk about Avos Yisrael. But I want to talk about Avos Yisrael vis-a-vis how does one deal with the pain of another Jew. Let me just begin. There's a sefer called Mekachi Hashem by the Weizsäcker Rav, one of the Choshev Hungarian Siddiq Rabbonim, and it's an entire book of responsa, or series of responsa, which he gave during the Holocaust. And the questions themselves are, could break your heart. Listen. But there in the introduction, he brings an awesome story, which is a very painful story. He says that once the Abderov, or Rabbi Yossi Chazan of Abt, was sitting with colleagues, and he started crying, and he was sobbing uncontrollably. And the Rebbe of Zisha Vanapola, also one of the great Chassidic masters, he turns to the Abderov and he says, Abderov, why are you crying? Why are you so broken? Abderov explained to him privately that he foresees before the coming of Mashiach, the nisyonos, the test, the trials, the tribulations, the pain, the suffering, the adversity that Klal Yisrael will go through will be unbearable. It's we say in Hebrew, biltin is about it, but you can't. It's unbearable. The tzarus that people go through. So the Rebbe of Zusha said to him, right? It says in Zohar HaKadosh and Chazal that Eibusha doesn't send Yisurim on a person that are unbearable. You can't. In fact, there's a very interesting medrash which the Imrei Emes, the Ger Rebbe, quotes. Later, his son quoted it in a letter to Holocaust survivors. The pasuk says, "Anoisin shelle katzom." Literally means that God sends down snow like fleece, like wool, right? But the Chazal Taiche, Anoisin shelle, God gives people shelle, the snow, the coldness, tzemer in direct proportion to the amount of tzemer of wool that they have to warm themselves up, right? So, and the frat, everything comes from the and Rabbi Yossi starts giving him the shmuz, that everything comes from the Eibishter, and therefore, why are you crying about these terrible Yisrael? And that was Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi was renowned, that he lived, from our limited human perspective, a very, very, most incredibly difficult, painful life. He was a meducha b'yosurim, and everything he accepted b'hava. And there's a classic story that every school child is always told, of how a fellow came to the Maggid of Mezrich, and he said, Rebbe, how is it possible that one can bless Hashem not only for the good times, but even the bad times? And he said, go to my disciple Rav Zusha, and he went to Rav Zusha, and Rav Zusha said, I don't know what you're talking about. You must have the wrong address, because I never had bad times. There's actually a Chassidic interpretation, the Sforim HaKadoshim, Tzaddik v'toivle tzaddik gomer, which means who tzaddik, everything is good, everything is wonderful. He doesn't feel any pain. That's the raya of a tzaddik gomer. Someone is completely, utterly holy. Right? Rav Zusha teaches himself, Hashem beirach Avram bakol. Avram was blessed with this trait of hakol l'tov. Everything happens, he only saw the good. And there were people who actually merited that by life was, whatever happened. There was one of the first Tzaddiker Rebbe. He was in jail for 15 months, suffering terribly. He was in a prison, in a Russian dungeon of despair, and there was church bells ringing all the time, which disturbed his whatever. And he kept his fingers in his ears. And when he was released from jail, he had a punctured eardrum. And his shver, his father-in-law, the first, the Kalim, the Aaron of Kalim, asked him, tell me, now that you've been released, you've been liberated, how do you feel? And he shrugged his shoulders and said, Mali hosa, Mali hocha. Makes no difference to me where physically I am. A prison cell, suffering terrible deprivation, living in the regal palaces of vision. For such a person on such a spiritual level, it didn't seem to make any difference. So Zush is basically giving him this whole spiel, right? That since Anisik Shalak Katzam and all tzaras really are given by the Eibishter for a reason, and therefore, why are you crying? Right? The Eibush doesn't give a person more tzaras, more challenges, more adversity than they could be soivel, than they could handle. And when the Abderov heard this, he started crying even more. And he said, but who knows how much tzaras could even be soivel? We know that the first step of redemption is Vaytzeisi Eschem Mitachas Sivlis Mitzrayim. To leave Egypt, you first have to go out of leave the ability to be soivel, to feel the pain. As long as Jews can be soivel golos, they can handle golos, they can put up with all the adversity, right? Then Mashiach doesn't come. When a Jew reaches to the point where it's unbearable, it's intolerable, then something happens. Which is the famous word, why do we eat? This question was asked actually on Pesach. Why do we first have the matzah and then we eat the more afterwards? If the matzah symbolizes liberation and the more symbolizes the pain, the suffering, the bitterness, so the order chronologically is first eat the more, then the pain. So one of the many, many answers given to this famous question is sometimes you only realize the more after the redemption. In other words, the Shirim said the name of the Rabbi of Shishcha, it's comparable to a prince who's exiled, right? And he's living amongst native, primitive people, right? And in the winter, his shoes are already full of holes, and the king sends an emissary to see how the prince is faring, right? And he says, what could I do? How could I improve your lot? How could I give you some comfort? He says, you could buy me another pair of shoes. So they bring another pair of shoes to the prince, and he's so happy he starts dancing. So the king's assistant sees this, and he starts crying his eyes out. Right? He says, Nebuch, Nebuch, Nebuch. The prince is now reduced to the level that what is he dancing about? What's his Gvaldige Simcha in life? He's given a pair of shoes. Sometimes you don't even realize. You see the real pain of Eden when you see what turns them on, what gives them simple. Right? So only after the matzah do you really feel the depth of the pain of the more. Right? And therefore there are times in life, right? There was once a gzeira against the Jews in Russia. They told one of the tzaddikim, and he said initially he was willing to makabel the gzeira from Shemayim, from heaven, until he realized there's a din which says bola more. If you just swallow the more and you don't feel the taste and you don't feel the pain, the bitterness of something, you haven't used, you haven't absorbed, you haven't internalized the message. Right? Let me just share with you two stories on this concept of not being able. Redemption comes when you're not able anymore to be so able to bear, to put up with that which is intolerable. And I heard these stories recently. I was speaking at a dinner for an organization called Bonei Olam, which deals with couples from Haredi couples who are suffering from infertility. And the founder of this group, who himself has no children, he told these two stories. I thought they partially hit me. One story is about a person, a very wealthy person, magnate, had a big factory, employed hundreds of people. And he had a friend, a guy he knew, a couple he knew, and both the father and mother soon died in quick succession. They're leaving a daughter, a teenage daughter, an 18-year-old daughter, who is now a Kailik Yosef. From both sides, no father, no mother. In those days, 150, 200 years ago in Poland, there was no social network, no welfare system. And that would mean you starve to death. And Rachmanis, he brought her in the firm, which is a little girl, what's she going to do? Put her in the front office, his office. And eventually he noticed she's a very smart, sharp, shrewd girl. She knows how to conduct things, and she very swiftly, she went up the ranks of the business, and soon he relied on her for her advice, and she really picked up. She was very streetwise, and soon she came like sort of the inner cabinet, and he would like rely on her for decisions, etc. And she had a decision-making role. Suddenly, a few years passed, and she's doing really successful. She's like the darling of everyone's eyes, and suddenly a sizable amount of money is lost from the firm. And they bring in sort of like forensic accountants like today, and they try to chase the money, and there's the money trail, the paper trail, blah, blah. And the accountants realized the only possible culprit here is this girl. She had access to all the keys, to all the vaults, to all the information, and the money's gone without a trace. And finally, the boss, was this religious guy, calls her in and says, "I don't understand you. I took you out from the streets, right? I was very friendly and close to your parents. I did a favor. I employed you. I picked you up, Mamash. You graduated. You went from step to step. You're in a very good position. You're on a lucrative wage, etc., etc., etc. How could you do this to me, to steal from my firm, like whatever?" And she denied that. She burst out into tears. But obviously, after making the accusation, there was nothing further that she could do. She had to resign from the firm. She went home. She was brokenhearted. She was probably deprived of food. And within not a long time, she was found dead. Now, soon after this poor girl died, suddenly, bingo, eureka, the penny drops, and suddenly the accountants discovered a new bank where this firm had an account, and all the supposedly missing money was found in that account. Right? So this boss suddenly realized that this girl died Pashut in vain. That it was his accusation that killed an innocent girl. How do you do tshuva? How do you atone for such a Jewish blood was spilled. A girl lost her life because of just your accusation. He was beside himself in grief. So he went to one of the great Hasidic masters at the time, whose name was Rabbi Yossi Chazan. He journeys to Primishlan, waits there in the queue to go into the holy Rabbi Yossi Chazan. As he walks in the threshold of the room of Rabbi Yossi Chazan, the Rabbi Yossi Chazan says, "Ritzeach aruis, murder out. I'm not accepting murderers in my forepew." But this guy was a wealthy man, and wealthy people, besides having a lot of money, they have a lot of attitude. They have a lot of chutzpah, and he ain't going. You have to drag me out. Rebbe, I need a tikkun, and he told him the story. He let him in, told him the story, and the Mayor Pimishana closed his eyes. I said, "The only tikkun I can get to you is ulai, maybe. You will go into Gullus for 4 years. In a self-imposed exile, you're not allowed to sleep on a bed more than one consecutive night. You're not allowed to ask, to beg for anything. If someone wants to give you food or money from the goodness of their heart, they're entitled to give you. You can't ask, and you have to spend 4 years just on the road. And afterwards, go home, maybe the Abish will have mercy on your soul." And this poor guy didn't have time to say goodbye to wife, kids, family, everyone, just hit the road. And for a person who's used to living in the lap of luxury, it's an incredibly difficult experience. And he's really at the end of 3 years have passed, and it's he's at the end of his tether. He's emotionally cracking. And he found himself in a city called Sanz in Galicia. And he's had it. He's finished. And the fact that he knows that Pesach is coming up, and this is the 3rd year he's not going to be with his family, with his wife, with his kids, Pesach. He goes into where's he going to stay? He slept in the Vay Bishul, the women's gallery in Bishul, where it's relatively quiet. Before he falls asleep, he takes out a tillum, he starts saying tillum, and he's crying his eyes out. He's pushed like, "Abish, I've had enough, I can't take it anymore. I'm about to burst." Suddenly a fellow comes in, sees him, and he sees the guy at the end of this. "To help you, have you had a meal tonight? You look very fat." He said, "I haven't eaten probably a meal in a week." He's first gone home. Takes him home, gives him a meal. The guy has a ravenous gluttonous, he's just eating the poor guy out of house and home. Right? And he pours out his heart, and he tells him the whole story from the beginning. And then he tells him, "There's nobody the only one in this generation, this area can help you. Such a problem, I don't know what to advise you. Go to the Rav of our town, the Samter Rebbe, the Divrei Chaim. He's the only one who can possibly give you advice." They schlepped him into the Divrei Chaim. The Divrei Chaim said, "Okay, if you can't," he started crying his eyes out. He said, "If you can't take it anymore, you've come to the end of your tether, okay, then your gullus is declared over. You can go home. Your business, your wife, your family, your friends. Beforehand, go to Primishlan, go to the grave of Rabbi Primishlaner, and tell them that I, the Rav of Sanz, Paskin, that your gullus is over, and you're entitled to go." That's exactly what he did, and he lived happily ever after. But when was the Sanzer Rebbe able to give him this disposition? When it was suddenly unbearable. There's a very similar story I heard, which is awesome. It's an awesome story. Incredible story. There once was a Magefa. Let me just start from the beginning. There was a big tzaddik in Erzol called Rabbi Rabinovich. He told the story. He had a grandfather called Mordechai Arya, who was the son of Yeshua Asher Porosov, who was the son of the holy Yidakosh, one of the great Hasidic masters in Poland. And once upon a time, there was a terrible Magefa, a plague, and Jews were going down like 10-pin bowling pins. It was like the So what happened was the Cheskel of Kozhmir, one of the great masters, who was the father of, let's say, the Mojitzer dynasty and others. He called to his mates, and he said to send over this young man, Rabbi Arya Mordechai, he was 16, 17, 18 at the time, a young lad, he was just married, actually. Come over, and he needs his help. What happened? Yidden are dying. This is Magefa. There's an infectious disease going around. And hundreds of petitioners are coming every day to Kozhmir to ask the Chatzkel for help. They can't even go into him. So what he did is he used to open up the door of the window to the Rebbe's house. The Gabbai would stand there, and he needs a Gabbai to do the work. So they sent this fellow, Arya Mordechai. He would stand there during the day. People would come, would queue up. They would give their petition, their note with their names and mothers' names. He would then take it, and the Chatzkel Kosher would sit by his desk, and he would tell them whether to put the zettel on the right side or the left side of his desk. There's two desks adjacent to where the Rebbe was sitting. He would tell this zettel goes to the right, this zettel goes to the left. And then at the end of the evening, he would put his hands over the zettel on the right, and he would say Kapitel Tillim and pray and cry and do whatever Rebbes do, right? And it didn't take long for this young new mashpak to figure out that any zettel that was placed on the right table would live. They would have to be healed, they have a refuah, and ultimately they would live. Any zettel with the Rebbe hastened to be put on the left side of the table, right? They wouldn't make it out. That was it. Finished. It was, and the death sentence was decreed. Okay, and this is happening day after day after day. And like Mamish, finally, he's standing there one day by the window. This young fellow, Arya Mordechai, right? He's standing there by the window, and a woman comes to him, and she's shaking. She's trembling. Says, Rebbe, when people get an infection in a house, it could easily spread. I've now lost my husband and my six children. They all died. I buried them, right? I have one son left. And now he's come down with the same disease. She begs him with every fiber of her being to find the Rebbe should be Peil Yeshua. Right? She goes, Arya takes the zettel, he goes to the Cheskel of Kozhmir, put it on the left side. Okay? He doesn't watch, but when it comes, he didn't have it in his heart. How a lady lost a husband with 6 kids. It's the only thing she has left in the world. He put it on the right. After the whole day's business is done, now that Rebbe does his whatever, he makes prayers and whatever Rebbes do. No idea if I know how to be a Rebbe. I wouldn't be a Rabbi in Holy Lona, would I? Be a Rebbe, right? But he does whatever hocus pocus Rebbes do. And bingo, he starts, something's wrong here. And he starts pacing up and down. And he says, Arya Mordechai, did you mess with anything today? Something's wrong. There's a wrong zettel on the right side, which shouldn't be there. So you're dealing with a guy who obviously has Ruach HaKodesh powers. He's you can't mess with him. You can't tell him no. You can't tell him not tell the truth. So he says, yeah, I did. He says, why did you do it? Right? So he told the story about this woman, right? So he says, Shlita, right? Do you think you have more Avos Yisrael than I have? Right? You're a greater Avos Yisrael than I do? Do I not feel the woman's pain? None of us. I know, I look up to heaven, if the Gzeira has already been Nigzer and Echtel, the decree has already been decreed, stamped, sealed, right? Then I put on the left. There's nothing I could do. I can't avert the decree. But if I know it hasn't yet been decided, then I put it on the right side and I daven for it. Right? But you put it on the zettel, which should have been on the left, not my decision, but heaven's decision. You put it on the right. Right? So you know what happened in heaven? They decided, okay, this young shnook, he's the one who's messing up the order here in heaven. He's going to take the place, that kid will live, who the Rebbe davened for, the guy who was placed on the right side, and you're going to die. But I took responsibility. I took you on my shoulders to be my helper, my Meshoris, my Gabbai. And your Zayda, the Yirach Kodesh, was storming the heavens upstairs, right? And eventually we both were payal that you'll live. But because you sort of, you didn't keep according to the rules and the norms of the business, to mechaper for your aveira, in order that you should live and you shouldn't die as heaven wanted, you're going to have to leave Poland and you have to go to Israel, and your goal is to Eretz Yisrael will be your tikkun, your kapara, your aveirs. Hello? That's exactly what he did, and he moved to the fountain. Have you ever heard of the first Rav of Bnei Brak, and various stuff, Rabbeinu family in Yerushalayim? The funny thing is, how Hashgacha works out. Not all, but almost all of the European branch of the Yiddish Kodesh's family, with the big cities in there, Biala, etc., in Poland, were wiped out in the Holocaust. And these Rabinowitz or descendants of Aryamotai, who had done a bit of a no-no, right, and mixed in where he shouldn't, they all survived and have a flourishing family in Eretz Yisrael, right? But the moral of the story, what I'm telling you, is that there are two types generally of tzaddikim. There were tzaddikim like in the first story, tzaddikim like the Rebbe of Zishu, who only see good and only see holy, and the Mavarcham al Arak, Mavarcham al Atoiv, and they Rachol Rahman al everything is wonderful, everything is good, everything is shivisi. Then there are tzaddikim like the Apterov, right? Perhaps lesser level as far as whatever, right? But they feel the pain acutely. They feel the pain of Eve. And they know the purpose of a Jew, as the second pasuk is Atoluikein also l'Hashem. Said the Torah notation, when God told Noah, "I'm destroying the world." Everyone, the Velt says Noah successfully floated his company while the rest of the world went into liquidation, right? And God says, "Noah, you know what I'm doing." And what does Noah said? "You're the Eibishter, right?" Vayas Noach Kein. Noach is a yes man. God wants to destroy the world. Okay, he knows what he's God. That's why he's in that business, right? Look, God tells Moshe, "I'm destroying the world." Tells Avraham, no. A Yid has the power. The Eibishter gave Tzaddikim, the Yidden, the power to say no to God, right? And it's brought down in the Torah that a Tzaddik who's matzdik, who finds reason and explanations for the tzaras of Kal Yisrael, has begun to understand what the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael is all about, right? There's actually a Gemara. The Gemara says that Turnus Rupus Harosha, one of the great evildoers in history, asked Rabbi Akiva, he asked Rabbi Akiva, if your God runs the world and God made people poor, how dare you support them? Right? He says comparable to an Eved, a servant, right, who sins against his master. He's incarcerated, put into jail, and someone surreptitiously smuggles in and brings him food. If the king finds out, would he not be angry against the guy who brought him the food? To which Rabbi Akiva answered with an equal famous parable. Well, what if it's not Stam and Eved? What if it's the prince who sins against his father, and he deserves punishment, but someone who secretly in his heart still loves the king, and of loyalty to the king, he's supporting the prince, the king will be happy. And we Jews are, to which the obvious question before us, but maybe the Jew is not B'chinas Bonim, maybe the Jew is B'chinas Avodim. Maybe he hasn't reached that level of having a father-son relationship with God. Only king and subject. To which Tzaddikim answered, yes, you're right. But when you brought your Torah to the Tzaddik, and the Tzaddik is Zicher, Bonim Atam Hashem L'Keichem, a child unto God, therefore, for the sake of the Tzaddik, who feels the pain so acutely, he surely will, right? Now, the point is, whenever you see, sometimes when a person has a personal sorrow, it's very, very worthwhile when he's mastic din and uses it as a spur to greater creativity, etc., etc. But never try to be mastic and try to understand someone else's sorrow. A great wise man once said, the greatest trouble of life is that we think when we should feel, and we feel when we should think. You have to know what part of your anatomy to use at what occasion, right? When you see another person in pain, empathize, feel. Don't start theologizing. Don't become a philosopher all of a sudden. Your own sorrows, isn't right? The Pasuk says, "V'dal loiter dar beriba." There's a Chassidish prat The Gemara says, "Yo and Yusuf Yisrael." Sometimes poverty is beautiful for a person; it disciplines them and encourages them. I said, if I bring it the other day, Nancy Reagan used to say that women are like tea bags; you don't know the strength until they're in hot water. Preachers used to say that the adversity is the diamond dust with which God polishes his jewels with. It's all great for your own source. But even if it's Yo and Yusuf Yisrael, Vidal Tehed Beriba, don't consider that. Don't say it's something good for him, right? There's a Chassidish prat, Vayifen koi vakoi, vayar ki einish, right? Sometimes koi is the midah of shtaivus, right? Whatever happens, azoi is for a reason. It's all the same. It makes no difference to when Moshe Rabbeinu sees an Egyptian taskmaster beating up and afflicting a Jew. He gets rid of the midah of koi vakoi of shtavus, which is a gewaldige midah in your own personal relationships, and he takes the Egyptian and he buries him. He does something practical to do something. And that's to me the bechlal of, by the way, this debate, or not debate, but it's this difference in shita between the Abderov versus Reb Zusha, these two approaches, is really a debate in antiquity, as Forum say, on the night of the Seder. You remember, we have matzah. After the matzah, we have morah. Right? Matzah symbolizes redemption, liberation. Morah is pain, suffering. Then afterwards we have a thing called kirach. We take a sandwich, hill sandwich, and we put matzah and morah together, or in temple times, korban pesach and matzah and morah, right? And we say zeichel and English hill, Kenaf hills, matzah v'tzrakayim. This is our commemoration of what the ancient practice of Hill, the sage, who would make the sandwich. What are we doing here? What's a hill sandwich? What does it mean? So the all major commentators explain matzah, certainly korban pesach, are symbolic of redemption, of liberation. Mor, which is Gematria Moves, is symbolic of pain, suffering, it's bitter. People like Hill can make a sandwich. They can eat the matzah and mor simultaneously. It's one big shalom for them. Because for them, the Gemara says in Brachos that when Hill was walking towards the city, and he would hear a kol tzvacha, he'd hear cries, shrieks, horrors, he would say, Amuftachani, I am certain it's not coming from my house, right? And the Gemara says, "Va'olav akasav omer upon Hill." The pasuk says, "Mishmua ra la'yira v'lachim liva b'tuach Hashem." He had such deep faith in Hashem, which was like contagious, and it was taken over by his family. He knew a sound, a shriek of horror, of pain, of anguish, cannot emanate from his house. Impossible. Hello? Says the Gemara in Pesachim that Chalukim hayu chaveiro, his mates, right, were. His friends disagreed with Hill, and they said it has to be eaten separately. Who is the one who gave us this tradition that halacha is not like Hill? Rabbi Yossi. What do you know about Rabbi Yossi and the Gemara? Anybody? Did Rabbi Yossi have an easy life or a difficult life? A hard life. First of all, the Gemara says in Kiddushin, Rabbi Yossi never saw his pants. His father died while his mother was pregnant with him, and his mother died in childbirth. He lost his entire wealth, etc., etc., a bunch of things. Finally, the Gemara says that when Rabbi Yechon would go to a Shiva house to comfort the mourners, someone lost a child, he would take out a bone, or a tooth, and say, Dein garmo dasiro abir. This is the bone of my 10th child that he buried. Hello? Imagine losing 10 children in your lifetime, an unnatural thing. Hello? You with me? Yeah? Yet the Gemara says in Brachos when Rabbi Yechon was ill, and his colleague comes to him and says, Chavivin alecha Yisurim? Do you appreciate Yisurim? That suffering, pain, it elevates, it sublimates, it refines a person. He said, Lehein v'leischor. I want neither the Yisurim, the pain, I want no the reward. When you look for yourself, you can do what you want. Stand on your head, break your head against the wall. Another Jew, you have to feel their pain as acutely as your own pain, right? And you shouldn't slumber until you do something to alleviate. I'll leave you with just one story. I said this in the Farang the other night. Somewhere? I don't know where. One of my favorite stories. Nothing to do with what we're talking about, but just a good story to end off as we're right after Gimel Tammuz. When I was one of the earliest years when I was in Lubavitch, the Rebbe would blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And there was always, the Rebbe would blow the first 30 blasts. The Tiyas Demushin, as it's known. And the Rebbe would blow, and it was like one of these awesome, incredible, transcendent moments. Like the Rebbe's face was aglow, like radiant. It was like, and the Rebbe would blow. And Chassidim would say amongst themselves afterwards. Some years it went very, very easy. The the tkiyas were loud, sharp, easy. And some years they were incredibly difficult, just very hard. One year the Rebbe blew the first 28 tkiyas, and it was like, bingo, one after the other. And then he could not get the penultimate tkiyah out of the shofar, right? The note is not coming out. And the Rebbe, when the Rebbe came out of the tkiyas, he always had the notes, the panim, in front of him. And the tkiyas not coming. The Rebbe took his talus and just threw it over the panim again, and you could hear the Rebbe crying, softly. And then the Rebbe's there for what seems to be eternity, and then he takes his talus off, and he starts looking at people in the crowd, just scanning the crowd. And then the Rebbe starts to blow again, and again it doesn't work. And again he puts his talus over the panim, and again he's crying. And again it's like this like half hour, 45 minutes, the place is going wild. They don't know where to put themselves. The world is like there's a moment in heaven, the cosmos, the celestial, the world. And the Rebbe is like struggling here, right? And finally, the Rebbe picks up his talus, takes the new shofar, and just blows the last tkiyas and finished, all over. Nobody knows what in the world. Something's happening here, something epic, something, no one knows what. The next night, the Rebbe used to have a short farbrengen, a few sichos, one mimer, bench, and then you give out koshel bracha, like from the befer. And a guy comes by. He's been married for X amount of years, for quite a long time. And he says, he thought Rosh Hashanah is a new year, a new beginning, a new start. Opportunity. Rebbe, I want a bracha for a child. The Rebbe says, if you fulfill the promise you made yesterday, you'll have a child this year. So what he's trying to say, what was the promise yesterday? B'shas tkiyas. Then he remembered, in the time that I was having this difficulty blowing the shofar, he thought to himself, if only I had a baby, I would bring him here to 770 to hear the Rebbe's tkiyas. That thought passed his mind in peace. And so, except, the Rebbe gave Koshel bracha, and he went off, and you could imagine that 9 months later he had a baby, and the little baby was born. By tkiyas next year, he shut into 770 both days, and he decided, since he was born a bracha that he got by Koshel bracha after the farbrengen, he brought wrapped up the baby, brought him to Koshel bracha. And the Rebbe poured the wine. The father for the little baby, like they had tat. And the Rebbe said, "Das eine von die tkiyas kinder." This is one of the tkiyas. The children, is sometimes in life you want something to happen. It's there, the brachas, but it ain't coming down. There's some kind of impediment. And for reasons that we ordinary folk don't really understand, but sometimes you need a certain difficulty, you need to break through, and then you're able to imamshit those brachas. And the point of the story is that we don't sleep, we don't whatever, until we're able to try to be mamshich brachas to feel the pain, and then make life easier. The task of a Jew is to relieve the pain of another Jew. And that was Rabbi Groner. That's not what he taught, that's what he lived. Right.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Chazan. We ask everyone to please go straight away upstairs to the Golden Shore. You can take a coffee and a piece of cake, and the main program will resume, will continue. For those watching on the live feed, we're going to turn it off for a minute, and we're going to resume in a moment.